Hey everyone, so today I am going to teach you about some of my favorite things in the world, which are honeybees. So the first thing I want to tell you, well, there's a picture of me with my beehive. That's probably from my first year being a beekeeper, which was probably like 6 or 7 years ago at this point. The first thing I want to tell you about is that honeybees are not wasps. So on the left, you see my honeybee. Now, if you look at it, it looks friendly, it looks furry, it looks like you want to pat it. And it's an herbivore. So that means that it's only eating plants and flowers. It can only sting you once. It has a nice furry body, and it makes honey. Now, if you look on the right, that is a wasp. And if you look at it, it looks angry, it looks mean. It's a carnivore, which means it eats meat. It wants to eat your hamburger. It can sting you multiple times. It has a smooth body, and it cannot make honey. So if you can answer yes to any of these questions, then you're like a honeybee. So do you like to hang out with your friends? Do you like the color yellow? Do you like the color purple? Do you like to dance? If you answered yes to any of these, then you're very similar to a honeybee. So by the end of today's lesson, I'm going to tell you why honeybees are awesome, what I do as a beekeeper, and how you can help the bees. So the first thing I want to let you know is that honeybees are pollinators. Pollinators are a group of insects that move pollen from the stamen in the flower to the pistil in the flower. When they move the pollen, a seed forms. And when a seed forms, fruit or vegetables grow around it. So if you think about an apple, the seed is in the middle, and then the fruit is around it. So that seed is formed from when the pollen is moved to a different part of the flower. And honeybees help that. I also included pictures of other pollinators. So the honeybee, their anatomy is broken into 3 different parts. You have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And here's a close-up on the head. And if you look on the sides of it, it has 2 complex eyes. And then in the middle of it, it has 3 simple eyes. So a honeybee actually has 5 eyes. And then the thing sticking out at the bottom right here, that is the proboscis, and it's like a straw that sucks up the nectar from the flowers. So honeybees go through complete metamorphosis, which means there are 4 different stages. If you think about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, that also goes through the same 4 stages. So at first, it's an egg. Then it goes to larva, which is the worm-like stage. Then it is capped off in the pupa stage, and then it emerges as an adult bee. And the first 3 stages are actually inside that honeycomb. So for the first 3 stages of life, it doesn't actually move. So if you look on the right, those things that look like little grains of rice, those are actually eggs. And then on the left, those worm-like creatures, that's the larva. So here you have 2 different stages of the honeybee's life. And here's a picture from my own beehive from a few years ago. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see these little, they look like C's, like the letter C, worms in the letter C. That's in the larva stage. And then if you look at the middle, it looks like there's yellow capped off, like yellow on the top of the honeycomb, and that's the pupa stage. So anywhere where you see that yellow cap, adult bees are going to emerge from there in about a week or so. And here's another close-up on that pupa stage. And if you see in the middle, those pupa look larger. Those are actually boy bees. They're called drones. And they have a bigger body, so their pupa needs to be larger. And there's a great video right there on the life cycle of a honeybee. I will include it in the assignment so you can watch it when you have time. So honeybees are very social. They live in a beehive. A beehive will range from anywhere from about 10,000 to about 40,000 bees. But there are only 3 types of honeybees inside the beehive. So you have the queen bee. There's only 1 of her. You have the drone bee. Those are the boys, and there's about 100 to 200 of them in the hive. And then the majority of the hive is made up of worker bees, which are all female. So the queen bee, there's only one of her in the hive, and her job is to lay as many eggs as possible. She can't do anything but lay eggs, so the worker bees feed her and clean her and make sure she is healthy enough to lay eggs. And there's a picture from my beehive. That's the queen bee. She's long and slender. Sometimes different beekeepers will mark the queen with like a colored marker so that you can find her easily. She's not marked here. I just know that's what she looks like. There's another picture from my beehive. There, the queen actually has her abdomen inside the honeycomb, and she's actually in the process of laying an egg. Next, we have the drones. The drones are the males in the hive, and there's only about 100 of them in a hive about 10,000. And I'm sorry to say this, boys, if you were a honeybee, you would be useless. The drones don't do much. They don't do any work in the hive. They don't even feed themselves. They don't have a stinger. Pretty much all they do is help the queen lay eggs and then die. So, boys, if you were a honeybee, you'd be useless. Sorry. And here's the majority of the hive, which is the worker bees. The worker bees are all female. So the majority of the hive, that means about 10,000 to 40,000 bees are female. And they have different jobs depending on how old they are. So when the adult bee first emerges from the hive, they become a cleaner bee, which means they go around and clean the cells near them. After a few days of doing that, they've graduated on to be a nurse bee. A nurse bee feeds the larva and makes honey. After that, they become a builder, which means they build the honeycomb. They've actually, by this time, they're about a week and a half to 2 weeks old, and they have glands on the side of them where wax comes out of, so they use that wax and mold it into the honeycomb. And then after that, you get one of 3 jobs for the rest of your life. You're either a guard bee, which means you fly in front of the hive and make sure you guard the hive from intruders. The next one is a forager bee, which most bees will end up being forager bees. And that means they go out to flowers and they collect nectar, pollen, and propolis. And the other job you could have is you could be the undertaker bee, which that means you clean out any dead bees out of the beehive. So bees collect 3 things from flowers. They collect pollen, nectar, and propolis. Pollen is their protein. That's the yellow stuff that's on cars. If you're allergic to bees, that's what you're allergic to. And here's a picture from my beehive. And pollen, even though it looks yellow or orange, it comes in a wide variety of colors. So you can see there I have a dark orange to a light yellow. They come, depending on the flower, it has a slightly different color pollen. The next thing they collect is nectar. Nectar is from the hive. It's a liquid. They suck it up with their proboscis. Then they bring it back to the hive, and they actually spit it up into one of the little honeycombs. And then the bees will actually make that nectar into honey. So it starts off as nectar, and then as they dehydrate water, so they're flapping their wings super fast to get rid of some of the water content in that nectar, and it becomes honey. Once they've created that honey and they know it's perfect, they actually put a wax capping on it so they know, okay, I'm done creating that honey. I can go on to the next honeycomb to dehydrate it a little more. And the picture that you're looking at is that that honey that's been capped. So we call that capped honey. And that means that honey is safe to eat now. The bees can use it as food. That's their carbohydrate. And that's what it looks like in the hive. And bees find food by dancing. They do something called the waggle dance. Let's see if I can actually play this for you.
Honeybees have some fascinating abilities, among them being able to communicate by performing a unique dance. It informs hive mates where a newly discovered food source is located. Every cycle of this waggle dance roughly describes the shape of the figure 8. Let's rewind and look in more detail. The bee only waggles on a part of its route, the straight run, indicated here by the waved line. The secret lies in the direction of the straight run, or to be more precise, in the angle between the straight run and the perpendicular, which in this case is 90 degrees to the left. This tells the other bees that food is available 90 degrees to the left of the sun. If the angle is 60 degrees to the right, they'll be flying 60 degrees to the right of the sun.
So as you can see, bees use math every day in their life. So they find their way back to the hive by using their sense of smell. So each hive has a different scent, and the bees kind of have that scent. And when they come back to the hive, they know if they're at the right hive because of its smell. If they smell different, if they go to the wrong hive, those guard bees will kick them out and tell them, "Hey, wrong hive, buddy." So let me tell you a little bit my life as a beekeeper. So that's a picture of one of my first hives that I ever had. Inside the hive, there are 10 frames, and this is what we call a frame. And then they have some type of plastic on it, and that's where the bees are going to create honeycomb. That's where they're going to build it out, and that's where they're going to put the pollen, nectar, propolis. That's where they're going to lay their eggs. Everything's going to go in there. So there's 10 frames per box. When I get the bees, they come in a box that's about the size of a shoebox, and there's about 10,000 bees in there with one queen. So if you look, that little circle on the left, that's a queen cage, and she's actually kept by herself because she has a certain scent, and so the bees have to get used to her scent so that they don't kill her. They want to accept her as the queen. So it takes a few days for that to happen. So until that happens, she's in a cage by herself. So that's actually a picture of the queen cage just strapped into one of the hives. And so you're going to watch a video later in this week that talks about how I get the bees out of that box into the hive. But that's a picture of it kind of right after it happened. And these are just more pictures from my hive. That's a bee cleaning out the honeycomb. There's just some more pictures. We're going to watch this video later in the week, so I'm going to skip it for now. These are pictures from a few years ago of my dad and myself checking his beehive. So I have to check it about 1 to every 2 weeks, just to make sure the bees are doing everything they're supposed to, the queen's doing everything she's supposed to. And I wear that whole complete suit just as protection. When I first started beekeeping, I did not. And even though honeybees aren't aggressive, when I'm in there poking around at their home, sometimes they get angry with me. And you can see I'm like spraying stuff on them. What that is a smoker. And the smoke makes them think that there's a forest fire. So when there's a forest fire, they would try and eat as much food as possible so that if they had to fly away, they would be able to survive with all that food that's in their stomach. So when I spray them with smoke, it makes them just want to eat food and not worry about me. So that's what I'm actually doing with the smoker. These are pictures of swarm cells. I'm going to talk about that later in the week, so I'm kind of just going to go over it right now. So there's a picture of I had to split a beehive once into 2 separate hives. Again, I'll talk about that later in the week. So let me tell you about why the bees need your help. So their food is, we need to be planting more flowers. They need flowers to live on. And if you are planting flowers and vegetables and you have a garden, make sure that you're not using chemicals that are going to poison the bees. So when you see this picture of this beautiful green lawn, it looks like you could like roll around on it, have a picnic. But if you notice, there are no flowers. So when the bees see this, they see a desert. They are starving when they look at that beautiful green lawn. They need flowers. So dandelions are awesome for them. Clover is awesome for them. Any flowers that you have are great for them. So the bees need your help. A great way to do that is to plant flowers or just not kill the dandelions and the clover in your lawn. They're so good for the bees and they love them. So if you have any other questions, I would love to answer them. I hope that you learned something about honeybees today. And remember to plant flowers for your bees.